Hey guys, and welcome back to another reading. Sorry, it's been a while, but yeah, we're back trying another one. So we're going to continue with Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. We're going to go for verse 6 in chapter 1. So in the previous chapters, just as a refresher, we finished off with talking about how even intelligent people will have their own biases and make their own opinions. And they will surround their opinions with logic in order to back them up. And they are prone to making these impulsive um, opinions, basically, and try and defend them with logic. And very few people can beat them at making such a logical argument. And that's how you can have things get out of hand with these very intelligent people. Verse 6 kind of continues on with that sentiment. So it reads, "It has gradually become clear to me what every great philosophy up till now has consisted of, namely the confession of its originator and a species of involuntary and unconscious autobiography, and moreover that the moral or immoral purpose in every philosophy has constituted the true vital germ out of which the entire plant has always grown. Indeed, to understand how the abstrusest metaphysical assertions of a philosopher have been arrived at, it is always well and wise to first ask oneself, what morality do they or does he aim at? Accordingly, I do not believe that an impulse to knowledge is the father of philosophy, but that another impulse, here as elsewhere, has only made use of knowledge, and mistaken knowledge, as an instrument. But whoever considers the fundamental impulses of a man with a view to determine how far they might have here acted as inspiring genii, or as demons and kobolds, will find that they have all practiced philosophy at one time or another, and that each one of them would have been only too glad to look upon itself as the ultimate end of existence and legitimate lord over all the other impulses. For every impulse is imperious, and as such attempts to philosophize. To be sure, in the case of scholars and in the case of really scientific men, it may be otherwise. Better, if you will. There, there may really be such a thing as impulse to knowledge, some kind of small independent clockwork which, when well wound up, works away industriously to the end, without the rest of the scholarly impulses taking any material part therein. The actual interests of the scholar, therefore, are generally in quite another direction. In the family, perhaps, or in money making, or in politics. It is, in fact, almost indifferent at what point of research his little machine is placed, and whether the hopeful young worker becomes a good philologist, a mushroom specialist, or a chemist. He is not characterized by becoming this or that. In the philosopher, on the contrary, it is absolutely nothing impersonal, and above all his morality furnishes a decided and decisive testimony as to who he is. That is to say, in what order the deepest impulses of his nature stand to each other. So, in this verse, what Nietzsche is basically saying is that the point of philosophy is to establish the will or the doctrine of whoever is making it. You see that especially with famous philosophical mindsets like Plato. Plato came up with a bunch of ideas and philosophical ideas, and it took a mind of its own, and it inspires a unique mindset and moral mindset in the people who follow it. Same with um, Stoics who practices Stoicism, and you see the same with religion. Every time there is a great leader or great philosopher who establishes a philosophy or a doctrine, it always is a reflection of what that person believes, and it infects the people uh, who adopt that, and they basically take on the morals of the originators, so to say. And that is kind of how philosophy works. And it ties now back in with verse 5, which says that scholars and philosophers who make up their philosophies do so based off of opinions, based off of whims, that these are their feelings, not really objective observations which they make, and all they do is back them up and construct a very logical and very sound argument around their own opinions. And what then happens is, as these things become doctrine, it actually becomes, it takes a mind of its own and it becomes the legacy of that philosopher. And he says it doesn't really affect the working class nor the true scientists in that manner, because when you're working with objective truth, you can never really establish a true doctrine. Um, Science is too objective for that. You cannot impose your will on the natural world, even though there's plenty of people who have tried that. Once you go far enough, you find that the natural law always is superior to any human will. On to verse 7. How malicious philosophers can be. I know of nothing more stinging than the joke Empiricus took the liberty of making on Plato and the Platonist. He called them Dionysiocrates. I butchered that pronunciation. In its original sense and on the face of it, the word signifies flatterers of Dionysus, consequently tyrants, accessories, and lickspittles. Okay. Besides this, however, it is much to say they are all actors. There is nothing genuine about them, for Dionysioclax was a popular name for an actor, and the latter is really the malignant reproach that Epicurus cast upon Plato. He was annoyed by the grandiose manner, the mise-en-scene style of which Plato and his scholars were masters, of which Epicurus was not a master. He, the old schoolteacher of Samos, who was concealed in his little garden at Athens, and wrote 300 books, perhaps out of rage and ambitious envy of Plato, who knows? Greece took 100 years to find out who the garden god Epicurus really was. Did she ever find out? So verse 7, quite a bit shorter, and this is more of a musing as to the nature of philosophers. Again, the title of the first chapter really comes through here, because this was kind of how it was and still is with very intelligent people who make philosophy, so to say. They attack each other. People who hold opposing ideals will always attack each other, and sometimes in very aggressive manners. So this name I butchered, I can't say it, but basically Dionysus is the god of wine and sex and philosophers, strangely enough. And to call somebody like that, really just that is mudslinging. That's all it is, and you see it a lot in this day. And this is just proof that philosophers, even though they are these very intelligent people, are still very emotional people as well. They are still prone to the same emotional vulnerabilities as normal people, and when their knowledge is questioned, when you question the knowledge of a very intelligent person, they get extremely defensive. And because they're not used to controlling their emotions, so to say, they will lash out in very, very grand ways with very colorful language. Alright, verse 8. There's a point in every philosophy at which the conviction of the philosopher appears on the scene, or, to put in other words of an ancient mystery, adventativ asinos pulcher et fortissimus. So what this one means is that at any point the passion of the philosopher is going to come out in whatever philosophy that they back up. So any good philosopher, when they get passionate about what they talk about, you actually start getting a real glimpse into what they believe in. If they actually believe in the things that they say, or if they just trying to sound grandiose. So when you listen to somebody as they speak, listen for their emotion. Listen to see how much emotion they put behind it, and see if it feels genuine as well, because that's normally how you catch bad actors, is that they will always have this little false note behind whatever they say. All right, verse 9. You desire to live according to nature. O you noble Stoics, what fraud of words! Imagine to yourselves a being like nature, boundlessly extravagant, boundlessly indifferent, without purpose or consideration, without pity or justice, at once fruitful and barren and uncertain. Imagine to yourselves indifference as a power. How could you live in accordance with such indifference? To live is not that just endeavoring to be otherwise than this nature. Is not living valuing, is not living valuing, preferring, being unjust, being limited, endeavoring to be different. And granted that your imperative, living according to nature, means actually the same as living according to life. How could you do differently? Why should you make a principle out of what you yourselves are and must be? In reality, however, it is quite otherwise with you. While you pretend to read with rapture the canon of your law and nature, you want something quite the contrary. You extraordinary stage players and self-deluders. In your pride you wish to dedicate your morals and ideals to nature herself, and to incorporate them herein. You insist that you shall be nature according to the Stoa, and would like everything to be made after your own image, as a vast eternal glorification and generalism of Stoicism. With all your love for truth you have forced yourself so long and persistently with such hypnotic rigidity to see nature falsely, that is to say stoically, that you are no longer able to see it otherwise, and to crown all some unforgivable super superciliousness gives you the bedlamite hope that because you are able to tyrannize over yourselves, Stoicism is self-tyranny, nature will also allow herself to be tyrannized over. It is not the Stoic a part of nature? That is an old and everlasting story. What happened to old times with the Stoics still happened today. As soon as every philosophy begins to believe in itself, it always creates the world in its own image. It cannot do otherwise. Philosophy is this tyrannical impulse itself, the most spiritual will to power, the will to creation of the world, the will of the causa prima. Or as if to prove his point in verse 7, he viciously attacks the Stoics. So during Nietzsche's time, Stoicism was quite prevalent. It is still today quite prevalent, and Stoics like to see themselves as superior. So the core of Stoicism is to let go of emotion, of worldly desire, in order to strictly pursue the truth. And it's a branch of knowledge, a branch of philosophy that's quite popular among people who do not really have control over their emotions and are unable to understand and interpret the emotions of others. They see emotion as a bad thing. It's kind of like the downfall of empirical thinking, and so they believe that it should be done away with. And one of the ways that Stoics like to defend their argument is to say that nature herself does not have emotion. Nature is not an emotional thing. A rock doesn't care if it's rained on, if it's burnt, or anything like that. It just exists. But Nietzsche attacks them and says that they that they are actually defying nature because they wish to impart their own views onto nature. So, and that nature herself doesn't actually care about the Stoics. The Stoics are so proud that they embody nature, but nature doesn't care. Uh, and in fact, them trying to embody nature is also a defiance of nature, because the whole point of being alive is to defy nature. The natural world just wants to devolve into chaos. To be alive, to have your body, your molecules, your cells all organize into this being that has purpose and meaning and walk around trying to achieve something, that is defiance of natural order. And the Stoics wants to impart their views onto nature and say, hey, we are like nature, but rather nature's like us. So we are superior. And that's actually what Nietzsche is trying to say as well, is that all philosophies are like that. When you look at any philosophical movement or religious movement, they all seek to explain the origin of the universe, the causa prima, the primal cause, everything that started and would start because of this one central philosophy. And that's the. But he likes to attack Stoics as well, because one of the things that Nietzsche hates about the Stoics is that they actively ignore their own emotional drive in order to explore and understand the natural order of things. You can't separate emotion from humanity. We are emotional creatures. So if so Nietzsche says that if Stoics were to be true to nature, they would do nothing. They would just exist. They wouldn't eat. They wouldn't want to discover. They wouldn't think. They would just be, which is impossible for a human. And instead, what the Stoics try to do is they try and pursue truth, try and pursue understanding, which is an emotional drive. Therefore, they're contradicting their own philosophy, and they contradict nature itself. And to actually call all philosophy a tyrannized version of life, that is profound, because that is ultimately what we do. Whenever we, even as an individual, develop our own moral compass, our own set of morals and philosophies that we like to live by, we like to shape the world around us according to those philosophies. If I believe that, let's say, the color red signified something important, I would start painting my world red in order to um, embody the importance I imposed on that color. And so my world will start looking red. And that's a unique trait that we as humans have, is once we believe something, we can actually impose that belief on the world around us, on the people around us, and we can actually start making the world bend to our beliefs to a degree. Reality will always fact check us at the end of the day, but until it does, we have control. All right, verse 10. The eagerness and subtlety, I should even say craftiness, with which the problem of the real and the apparent world is dealt with at present throughout Europe, furnished food through thought and attention. And he who hears only a will to truth in the background and nothing else cannot certainly boast of the sharpest ears. In rare and isolated cases it may really have happened that such a will to truth, a certain extravagant and adventurous pluck at metaphysician's ambition for the forlorn hope, has participated therein. What which in the end always prefers a handful of certainty to a whole cartload of beautiful possibilities. There may even be puritanical fantastics of conscience who prefer to put their last trust in such an in a such sure nothing, rather in an uncertain something. But that is nihilism, and the sign of a despairing morally wearied soul, notwithstanding the courageous bearing such a virtue may display. It seems, however, to be otherwise with stronger and livelier thinkers who are still eager for life, in that they side against appearance and speak superciliously of perspective, and that they rank the credibility of their own bodies about as low as the credibility of the ocular evidence that the earth stands still, and thus apparently allowing with complacency their secure possession to escape. For what does one at present believe in more firmly than in one's body? Who knows if they are not really trying to win back something which was formerly an even securer possession, something of the old domain of the faith of former times, perhaps the immortal soul, perhaps the old God. In short, ideas by which they could live better, that is to say, more vigorously and more joyously than by modern ideas. There is distrust in these modern ideas, in this mode of looking at things, a disbelief in all that has been constructed yesterday and today. There is perhaps some slight admixture of satiety and scorn, which can no longer endure the bric-a-brac of ideas and most varied origin, such, such as so-called positivism at present throws to the market. A disgust of the more refined taste of the village fair motleynesss and patchiness of all these reality philosophasters, in whom there is nothing either new or true, except this motleynesss. Therein it seems to me that we should agree with those skeptical anti-realists and knowledge microscopists of the present day. Their instinct, which repels them from modern reality, is unrefuted. What do their retrograde bypaths concern us? The main thing about them is not that they wish to go back, but that they wish to go away therefrom. A little more strength, swing, courage, and artistic power, and they would be off and not back. Alright, so verse 10 brings up the point of nihilism. So, nihilism is a philosophical stance that people take, according to Nietzsche, once they have given up on the world. And you see that actually with a lot of nihilists, is that they they're sick of how the world is. However, they are unable to muster up the strength to change it or adopt a view that can help them adapt to the world around them. And so they rather just give up on it. They make up the point that everything is meaningless, that there's no point to all of this. When you ask a nihilist what's the point of life, they will say there is no point to life, you might just as well die. But they even lack the strength to do that. So, where's the credibility in what they have to say? They tend to have been people who tried everything just a little bit, but never really found a grasp on anything. Or they might have lost everything. That's why it says that they try and look for their old god or try and look for their immortal soul. It's because they're trying to find what they believe they have lost. But at the same time, they would rather have nothing than having possibility. You can, because the world around you is actually a world of infinite possibilities. There's always something you can latch on to. There's always a path forward as long as you have the strength to walk it. However, these people do not have the strength to walk it. They are tired, they are scared, and so they would rather just give up and accept that there is nothing. They grasp onto this certain nothing with everything that they have, and they try and convince other people that they are right as well. And that is the philosophy of nihilism. But a little more strength, swing, and courage and artistic power, and they would be off, not back. Meaning, if they actually had the strength, they would end themselves. is what Nietzsche is trying to say here. Um, because that there's no going back. Once the world has changed a certain way, you are forced to deal with that change. And nihilism is actually a symptom of a diseased person, and if it takes hold of an entire community, of an entire nation, of an entire religion, that is a really, really bad sign. Once people refuse to believe in anything, that is a bad sign. Which is actually strange that Nietzsche would bring this up because um, he rebels against the church quite a bit, but not against faith. That is actually an important distinction to make. Nietzsche criticizes the church because he believes that it held people back, but he never criticized faith. So once people lose their faith and they adopt nihilism, it means that there's a greater sickness going on because people need to believe in something. People need to have faith that the world is gonna keep spinning and that it doesn't just come to a standstill like the nihilists believe. And with that, I shall conclude today's reading. Thank you for joining us. Please join us next time and for verses 11 and more. Thank you and have a good day.